the Amsterdam Torture Museum. Welcome to part 2 of this collection of commentaries on torture. Episode 1, first of 6. We're looking at the brochure that is engaging in a form of foreshadowing, giving us a little bit of information that will then be explored at a later point of the tour. We are looking at the torture chair. We left off with this item which expresses the notion of the diffusion of responsibility. When a team of executioners or torturers work together, psychologically, they diffuse their responsibility. They diffuse their personal blame. It is diffused outwards so that the executioners and the torturers can perform their task without overwhelming guilt that they performed acts of horrific mistreatment of another human being. We'll begin with the image of the object. Stress and duress. This is the ladder. It's a variation of the rack. You can see the torturer at the bottom of the frame, tightening the device, creating excruciating stress in a stretching form of tension. But we have some explanatory text. The ladder. The furnishing of proof was confidential in the Inquisition procedure. Again, these torture devices were developed in a larger context of the Spanish Inquisition, of rooting out heresy and securing the social status of the Catholic Church. The examining magistrate or inquisitor recorded the incriminating facts in his file and tested those against scholarly theories on satanic power. Demonology was taken seriously by well-educated, intelligent leaders within the ecclesiastical community, within the larger scholarly community, the study of satanic power. It also made its way into the vernacular of how people talk about the power of Satan. You might have a grandmother who would say, you know, they just really ought to beat the devil out of that guy. Now, centuries ago, that was taken quite literally. Now it's taken more figuratively. It was argued that the poor sinner had to be reformed by the severest means. Speaking the truth by itself was a victory over evil. Torture with cords was a variant of the rack. The Spanish Inquisition was often employed in this method, questioning citizens suspected of practicing forbidden, heretical, Jewish, and Islamic customs. Again, Spain at the time was very cosmopolitan, especially cities like Seville, which was equally Christian, Islamic, Jewish, so on and so forth. But the lumping together of heresy, Jewish and Islamic customs is part and parcel to a fundamental sociological concept known as moral panic, developed by Stan Cohen at the London School of Economics, a good friend and colleague of mine. I cannot say enough great things about Stan Cohen, who led the way to helping us understand this phenomenon of lumping together heresy, Jewish, and Islamic customs. We see this today in this very similar form of moral panic where politicians and others political pundits will lump together undocumented immigrants along with crime, unemployment, disease, creating this larger threat of pollution that must be eradicated. So far, how far have we gone from these forms of sociological overreaction? Anyhow, let's get back to Amsterdam. These are breaks or masks that would be fitted over the head of the victim, who would then be turned loose into the community, where he or she would be scorned, would be humiliated. There's some explanatory information. Let's take a look at that. Particularly in times of turmoil, restrictions of free speech was a normal police duty. The mouths of those who insulted the royal house or uttered blasphemous words were literally stopped with iron gags. But in closed municipal societies, spreading gossip too was frequently looked upon as disorderly conduct. The culprit was transformed into a living caricature of these massive disgrace, featuring oversized ears, spectacles, tongues, and such unmistakable text. The maid that cannot be silent, will this muzzle be lent? Let's take a look at how this might be put into action. And we see this engraving here. That speaks for itself. That can't be terribly comfortable. Here's another incident that's been captured as in an engraving. You can see that this poor bloke is put on display, the head of a horse in the form of a brank. Local people looking on, gazing, laughing, carrying about. And what this illustration conveys is, once again, the social control of sexuality, the subjugation of women. What is featured in this engraving is the chastity belt. And as you can see, two men in tandem performing a punitive ritual. But there's some explanatory text. Let's go right to the real deal. This would be placed onto the woman's body, and as you can see, there are these very sharp spikes that would prevent any intrusion into this particular zone. Very painful for the woman to wear, very painful to breach. The torture chair. Also, an object within a larger ritual of punishment and pain. Interrogation. Let's take a moment to really explore the detail of this device. As you can see, the entire seated portion of the chair is covered with spikes. These are straps that would be secured and tightened. The wrists would be secured under these enclosures, more forcibly bracing the body against the spikes, and again the ankles, everything drawn tight so that the executioner and the interrogator can go about the process of extracting a confession, oftentimes in the context of the Inquisition, but also in a larger paradigm of demonology. The chair. Witchcraft was total sin. Just not the head, but the whole body was subjected to the devil. Accordingly, this interrogation chair would be subject to a body in total torment. All the executioner had to do was to tighten the braces, and the weight of the victim would do the rest. In the course of interrogation, many victims would become convinced of their guilt and confess to the most bizarre particulars of their intercourse with the devil. The learned inquisitor, and generally the unlettered woman in the chair, would be living in the same world of anxiety in which the devil lurked as a visible, intangible tempter. In previous episodes, we have discussed the significance of the theory of the body, which becomes the ultimate material in which authorities inscribe their power. Demonology, the notion that evil lurks amongst us. Back to moral panic. The reason why moral panic has the term moral as a preface is because it is addressing these threats that are intangible but very much drive emotional overreaction to perceived social problems. With that, we're going to pause. I'm going to get myself a cup of coffee. We'll come back for part 2.